was one time when I first did the Lake Tahoe experience, the Guru Purnima course. So I had been put into this situation where I was somehow I was living in Lake Tahoe, and I decided that I would cook for all the people. Guruji said that he was going to come here for Guru Purnima, which was a huge honor. And I did cook for the course. And at the end of the course, on one of the days, just probably the last day or the day before the end, he had pulled some of the local organizers into a smaller room, and I was late because I had been in the kitchen, preparing some meal or something. And I walk in, and he was sitting at the front of the smaller room, and he had Tika, and he was kind of like bouncing her up and down, and she had this blissful look on her face, and it was such an amazing experience that I was just like put into this state of some kind of ecstasy, just experiencing her being sort of hanging out with the Guru in that kind of way. And people were sitting there like just in a state of joy, the way she was, like she had the look of bliss on her face, and he looked like he was having the time of his life, just being with innocent as a child. So these kinds of experiences, again, when she became 12 years old, it was after the Silver Jubilee. I guess that was the 25-year anniversary. And the following year, they had an event at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., where she had the honor of being an Art Excel child who had been through the Art Excel program. And she got up on the stage with Guruji and all these politicians from Washington, D.C., and she was asked to give, a little talk. And she was like the only kid that memorized her talk. Most of them were high school kids, and they read their talks. And she was the only one that really actually had it memorized. And I was sitting in the audience back, pretty far back, and I got to sort of see my daughter be honored by Guruji. And when she came out on the stage, he hadn't seen her for a little while, and he gave her a look, and they both melted, and it was just a beautiful moment. And to see her get up and be honored in that way was an amazing thing. So for me, this is one of the ways that how does he work with us as people? How does he uplift us through our own children, through honoring our own children? Such a beautiful, beautiful gift that he's given me. One other little story about her that was interesting. That we were, after this Lake Tahoe experience, we were going for a moonlight boat ride at the south end of Lake Tahoe, and we got to be riding in the car with him. And he, at one point on the way back from being out on the lake in the moonlight with him, it was a beautiful night. We were just driving along, and someone else was driving, and Tika was sitting with me in the back seat. And she just turns to me and she says, "Daddy, can we stop and pick up a video?" And this was something that she had never said before, that I remembered. I was surprised, like, "Tika, what do you mean stop and get a video?" And she said, "Let's get a video and take it home and watch it." And then she ended up, Guruji ended up kind of perking up. He was sitting in the front seat, and he ended up perking up and saying, "What did she say?" Like sort of questioning what did, and he really pursued it. And I said, "Well, Guruji," she said, I was really shocked. But she said, we should stop and pick up a video. And he got rather serious, and he said, "This is not what children at this age, really, they shouldn't be watching much video, that until they get to be 8 or 10 years old, it's not good for their development to sit and watch a lot of TV and stuff like that. It's just not very good for them. And he gave us a very, very beautiful little talk about how it's not good for their attention. It's better for them to be playing with things. And so to this day, I know it's like, I feel very strongly that he was, had planted that idea in her mind so he could have this conversation with us, because this was something that we needed to be aware of, especially then, because I became so involved later with working with children and teaching in schools. I'm now the international director, and I've been of the Yes for Schools program, or Sky Schools program, as we recently changed the name, which is getting the Youth Empowerment Seminar and the Art Excel program and all of the youth programs now, actually from the age of about 4 or 5 years old up until 17, and bringing this into schools, mostly in North America and South America. And so this is something that I've been very, very involved with as my life's work. So I needed that lesson, and he provided it for me.
You also hosted Gurudev in Lake Tahoe.
Correct.
How was that trip?
Well, I mean, that was quite an amazing experience. When right before he first came, I was very nervous, because I had somehow got drafted into the position of being the cook for 800 people for, I think it was 8 days at first. And then it grew over the years. We ended up hosting for about 5 or 6 years in a ski area where we had a professional kitchen. And I really had only cooked for about 20 people in my life before that. And so I for about 2 months before the event happened, I woke up at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. I would come downstairs and sit around and make up menus. And I decided that the best way for me to cook would be to cook my favorite dishes. So I would figure, how much food would it take to cook for 20 people, and figure out the quantities. And then I would multiply 20 times 40, I think is 800. Does that sound right? And I would come up with, we need so many cups of rice and so many pounds, and so many pounds of vegetables, and all the different things that we needed. Maple syrup was a big thing on my menu. I used to cook very different cuisines. Every night would be something slightly different, because I just had a sense that Western audiences would get tired of eating Indian food every night. So one night we'd have Italian, one night we'd have Chinese, one night we would have Thai food, one night we'd have Mexican food, one night we would have Indian food, so it was a constant alternation of different cuisines. And somehow I had the ability to cook some of those things. And so I did my best, and we ended up pulling it off. It was an amazing experience. It was a huge stretch. But just before he came, I saw him in Canada. And I was up at the Canadian Ashram, and I went to him in total fear. How am I going to do this? I have no idea, And he just sort of looked at me with one of his huhs, and he said, well, you're just going to make every meal a celebration. Every meal is going to be a special big celebration, and it's going to be a feast. So that was what he said. And I said, okay. So he didn't seem afraid at all. He had total confidence that I could pull it off. And and it ended up working out very, very well. And then after that, I ended up going to Navaratri, which was another incredible experience. And he really did take care of me in a way that I can't explain. Like I would just sit around and meditate from 1 a.m. because I was jet lagged. And then at 7 a.m, the pujas would start down below, and I would sit there and meditate and just be crying in such deep devotion, and just be completely enveloped by love. He was also in silence at that time, and at least that's what I was under the impression, that he was in silence for 9 days. And on the last day, actually, or second to the last day, there was this, I think it's the Chandi Homa, where he, they have all this water that they've been having on the altar, and it's been getting all these pujas and all the yagyas and all the chanting, and it's incredibly powerful charged water. And he would walk around with this on his head, or the head pundit would, and he would be there to support him. And it was such a powerful day. I was like just sitting there in the hall. There were only 200 people in the hall at that time. And they went around in a circle and moved around the hall. And at one point, the water thing came directly at me. I was just sitting on the floor there, and it just, like, about 15 or 20 feet, it just, like, the water just pulled in my direction. And Guruji sort of ran after to sort of support this experience. It was so powerful. And the energy was just so amazing. And afterwards, I got up, and at that time they would take all the water they would pour the water over his head, and then they would collect it. And he would take the water, and he'd have a big urn that was holding it. And he had a beautiful big pink lotus, and she would dip the lotus and he was completely soaking wet because he had just had water poured over him. And he would take the lotus, and he would boom, and he'd splash it right in each person's face. And I was like, I didn't know what hit me. I mean, it was so beautiful. And then after that, I had some other very, very powerful experiences. But, he has this ability to just know exactly what we need. And then it's like the thing that happened a couple days after that was he took us all out to a village where they had been working with very poor Indian women. Guruji's father, Pitaji, had started this thing called the Vista Project, where they were training poor young women to sew, and so that they would have some livelihood to feed themselves. And they had children with them. And they went out there, and they distributed saris to all of these people, Guruji and Banu Didi and Pitaji, Guruji's father. And they at the end of the whole thing, there was this bowl, and the bowl was crumpled laddu. And the laddu it wasn't complete laddu, it was just crumbs. And Guruji sort of looked around and said, who's going to distribute the laddu to the children? And he decided to pick me, because he had just seen me in Lake Tahoe cooking and working with all this food, and I had made way too much food. It was like I didn't know what I was doing, but anyway, he picks up this bowl and hands it to me, and then he says, well, we need a spoon. How is he going to get the laddu to the kids? So they find a spoon, and then there's these kids, and these kids are around me. There's like 50 kids. They're very poor, and their hands are shaking, and they're like this, looking up at me. And I'm supposed to, 50 hands are coming up like that. It was almost impossible. So eventually they figured out that they have to organize the line. and I ended up distributing this to these kids. And then a few minutes later, we ended up getting back on the bus and going back to the ashram. And I felt this thing in my guts. All he had done is given me a spoon and said, "Here, distribute this laddu." And that experience was so deep. It's hard to explain, but it was like there was this knife in my guts that was just being twisted around, and I could feel the sense of lack and the sense of need in these children that was so desperate. And then a few days later, I had said goodbye to him already, I think, and I was walking around the ashram in the early morning, and there were two boys that were on their way to school. I was getting ready to leave the ashram, and they were walking in one direction over a field, and I was walking in the other direction, and we stopped on the same trail, and they each had a red rose in their hand, and each of them, they saw me as some visitor, obviously, from some far-off country. They bowed to me, and they handed me the red rose. And I received it. And they had beautiful little uniforms on with little red ties and little shorts with suspenders and backpacks with book bags. And they were just so happy and so complete. They had such dignity, and they were here just to give me something. That was like their culture was to somehow honor the visitor. And it was such a powerful moment. And they bowed. They said, "Jai Gurudev," and I bowed. And I said, "Jai Gurudev." And they went on their way to school. And I stood there, and I sort of looked up at the sky, and I felt like I had this moment where I realized what Guruji's doing. That he has these children that are so poor that don't really have much of anything. And he's taken these other children that are on their way to the ashram school that have been given so much. They've been given an education, they've been given meditation, they've been given breathing practices, they've been given whatever. They seemed like they were completely different. It was a completely different world from the children that I had met a few days before. And I realized that this is exactly what Guruji's done and what he does. And really this was so beautiful because he's given dignity, and he's raised people up to that level where they have so much, they have something to give, and they're here just to give. And that this is what he's done all over the world, that this is his mission in life. And that what better mission could I have in my life than to be able to do that, to be able to just do what he does. And so I've been going ever since, and that was back in, I guess, 1997. And in 2002, we started working with youth leadership training. Actually, 2000, the year 2000 was when I first got inspired. I was at the Canadian ashram, and he was talking in his kutir one night. There were quite a few people in the room. There was probably 50 people in the living room, and he was telling stories about how the Indian invaders who had come over were destroying the Indian culture, and they were burning the holy books and the holy scriptures, and that people in the villages would hide books down in the wells when I think the invaders were there, and that so he was talking about the old days in India, and he started talking about the missionaries that had come over, like Christian missionaries had come over, and now they're going to many villages, and they're paying people to remove their bindis or something like that, and how he had been asked by the government if he could go back to the villages and give people a sense of their culture and their tradition. And so that's where they started doing youth leadership training programs. And so he's talking about this youth leadership training program, and it was relatively new. And then he stood up and he was talking to some people, and all of a sudden he sort of got everybody's attention again. And he said, we should do youth leadership training in the United States, in North America. And just as he said that, I had this thought, that's something that I would like to do. It just passed through my mind. And a few minutes later, he went back to talking to people, and then he sort of got everybody's attention again. He said, that idea of having youth leadership training, I think we'll definitely do it. And as he was saying that, I was looking at him from the other side of the room, and I caught eyes with him. He sort of was scanning the room, and he stopped for a second on my eyes, and I was like, okay, well, I think this is something that I'm going to take on. So I ended up doing that. I ended up coming up with a plan a few days later, an excuse for us to go to India to be trained. And we ended up following up, and we ended up doing it. And then the youth leadership training program ended up happening about a year later in Brownsville, Texas. So after we went to India, I brought a few young college students to India. We had quite an amazing experience. And then we ended up doing the first YLTP in North America in Brownsville, Texas, and traveling to Mexico. And that actually began the whole Mexico art of living. There had been no art of living in Mexico before that. And we started working with orphanages and working with street kids and teaching them some breathwater sound and teaching them Kriya and things like that. And that was back in 2001 when it started, or 2002. And then we did that for a number of years. And then, so it was just that one glance. It was like my eyes locked into his for a second, then it shifted, and I knew what I was going to do. I knew somehow that I was going to take this on. I had no idea how or what the adventure would unfold, but somehow it was like, it felt like the deal was sealed. And then, so we ended up doing that, and I ended up doing that for a few years, 4 or 5 years. And at one point, right after Hurricane Katrina hit in the United States, where the whole city of New Orleans was devastated, I was doing YLTP at that time, and we ended up going down there to see if we could work with people, but that there was so much destruction and devastation, and people were so stressed out that they didn't have any space in their mind for stress relief. So the following year, it was after the after the 30th year anniversary, I believe it was. I went to or no, was it the 26th? I can't remember now. Silver Jubilee. We went up to Rishikesh, and I was still itching to sort of do this YLTP youth leadership training in New Orleans. And it ended up being that I went to see Guruji as I was leaving India. We'd had a wonderful adventure, and we ended up in Rishikesh. And I ended up getting into the room to see him. And I said, Guruji, that hurricane in New Orleans was really devastating. We have to do youth leadership training. And he said, well, I don't think those American college students are going to do much. I don't know if anybody's really going to show up. I don't know. I'm not sure I don't think it's a good idea. And I was shocked. And I said, Guruji, we have to do this. It's the biggest disaster we've ever had in the United States. And he sort of was very lukewarm about it. He really was just, it felt like he was discouraging me from doing it. And I just kept saying, oh, but I think we have to do this. And then he ended up saying, well, okay, if you really think it's a good idea, you can put it out there and see if anything happens. And so I left it totally confused. We got in the car, we drove back to Delhi, got on the plane, and I was jet lagged for 2 weeks, but it was in a total state of confusion. And then at the end of that time, I ended up saying, I have to go to New Orleans and see what really is happening. And we went down there, and I saw that this was completely a mess, and that they really needed something. So we ended up organizing some programs, and they ended up being very well received. And after a few months, on his birthday, which was the middle of May, I ended up seeing him, and I said, Guruji, we've been doing that work in New Orleans, and it seems to be going well, and I think we're going to do we'd like to do a youth leadership training. And he sort of slapped me on the arm, and he said, yeah, go ahead and just continue. That was it. It was a big smile on his face. Just continue. And that was it. So these are the kind of interactions I've had with him. I'm not the kind of person that's always running to be in the kutir. Somehow I feel like he gives me what I need when I need it. And this is the way he's always dealt with me. And I felt very good about that, actually. I don't feel like I need him always there telling me what to do. Like, he's really empowered me and given me the freedom to just do what I know is best. And I check in with him as much as I feel like it's needed. And he always, tells us, he encourages us one way or the other. And, he gives us corrections and tells us what to do. But it's been very, he's just really, really empowered. I felt totally empowered, which is really the theme of this program that called the Youth Empowerment Seminar. If I'm going to go out and empower young people, and we're going to promote this program, I certainly have to have been empowered myself, and that's really what he's done with me. And I have a very strong trust in consciousness that he's telling me. I often tell people, this could be taken the wrong way, but I tell people that I'm reading it off the teleprompter, that there's a teleprompter that's right in here, and he's just telling me what to do and say in whatever moment, whatever is needed. I'm given what I need, and I trust that. And having that trust, well, the two words "just trust" are so profound. And I do trust. I trust that he's there with me, and that he's guiding me, and that he's giving me what's proper. Not that everybody always trusts me, but I still do my best, and I stay connected to him in here, which is where it's really important. And I think that's the message that he's given. There's one thing that I would like to tell about my very early thing that really helped this process. He said at one point, when I think it was within the first year that I was doing Art of Living, he sent out it was a knowledge fax, or it was some kind of a message to everyone that we should communicate with him in whatever way we feel pulled to communicate. In other words, we could write him a letter, or we could talk to a tree, or go out and talk to a cloud, or however we wanted to communicate, and that he would be there to get back to us, like in that moment. He would just simply be there, and he would answer whatever we really needed. If this was a sincere request, he would be there for us and let us know what we needed to, and this would happen. So I thought, wow, this sounds great. So I started writing him. And I did that very early. I mean, as soon as I heard this, I started writing him letters. And I would write, Dear Guruji, and I would have a question or something like that. And within a very short time, maybe 2 or 3 sentences, I would be writing. And all of a sudden, it was like the pen was taken over by him. And he would be answering me in whatever way I needed to hear. And I know this has some possibility for the ego getting in the way or something else, but this writing has been an amazing journey for me. And I actually would write notebooks and fill up notebooks and just files with all kinds of things. And a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3, must be 3, 4 years ago now, I decided to put together these writings because some of them are very, very beautiful. And I ended up writing a book about my own spiritual journey, which is called The Journey of a Blade of Grass, which is the name that I took for myself when I was 16 years old. And I decided that I didn't know where it came from, but I took that name. And since then, I've looked up blade of grass as a reference. It's all over Yoga Vashishta, but it's also it's all over literature ever since for many, many years. References from all different types of authors. So there's this has been used, this blade of grass theme, and I decided that this is my journey. It's my spiritual journey. So it's a book about all my influences, and many of the stories that I've told are also in this book. But there's one thing I'd like to one thing that came through that I really felt was almost like a personal manifesto for me, something that I could always turn to that would set me back on track if I ever felt like I got off of track. So I was hoping to read that right now, and it's quite simple. This is this is stored in this book here. The title is Whatever Happens is Okay. It's the plan. Just relax more and more and more. Empty the head, full in the heart. You bring the love. Stop demanding of yourself. Act from playfulness and emptiness. Don't know anything. Let God do what He wants with you. Just listen, completely empty of all notions. Conditioning keeps you repeating the same reality over and over. To do what has never been done, you have to be fresh, open, drop the preconceived. Trust my involvement. The more you trust, the more I run the show. The more doership you have, the less I run the show. This teaches you surrender. Keep showing up. These impulses also come from me. You don't need to know what's going on. Don't think, no strain. Just relax. This is enlightenment. The light is on when you trust. It's all trust. Each moment provides. Trust the unknown, then I use you fully. You be my instrument. There's nothing to worry about. Just be the follower. The best leader is the best follower. Just listen. The best follower gets the best jobs. The one who listens to God gets the divine work. I'm here with you every minute. When you think you should know and don't, just relax. Frustrated, mad, angry is resistance. Trust and relax. Humility is golden. the essence of listening. Whew. So that was a gift to me, given through this process. And to me, every line is coming from him. So I have that ability to be able to really go deep